All right, welcome everyone to another edition of Deconversion Stories. Today I have my friend Rob here, also known as Twentydragon, and we're going to be talking, of course, about Rob's journey away from his previous belief system, and also about his websites and stuff, and the games and stuff, which he's got a few examples to show you later on.
Games?
So, oh yes, indeed. Not like video games and stuff, dude. No. This is like,
where do I plug in the game?
Tabletop games. You plug it in on a table. Just any table, as long as it's big enough.
It's table friendly.
Yeah, it's table compatible.
Yes, it is.
It's got table 1.0, which is good for any table.
It's backwards compatible with any table as far back as 3000 BCE.
Oh, that's funny.
All right. Well, first of all, sir, welcome to the show. It's great
Thank
to
you.
have you here with us. What I usually ask of folks is sort of to take us back in the days of the indoctrination stuff and what you used to believe, and then how those questions started popping up, and eventually, you kind of saw the light, so to speak, and you kind of get your way through all of it and come out the other side being some kind of a agnostic or atheist.
Let's see.
My table is ready. Thanks,
Initially, I wasn't brought up religious to start with. We just kind of existed in this space where we had a sense there was a God. We kind of believed it, but we didn't really have any specifics or anything. We didn't have like a church community because we were constantly moving around. My dad had a hard time keeping a steady job, and so my parents divorced when I was very small, like 3.
Oh, wow.
So my dad got custody of me and my sister, and so it was just me and my dad and my sister growing up for the most part.
I got to admit, that's kind of a rare occurrence. Usually it's the other way around, right?
Yeah. And my mom moved back with her family in Florida, and we lived in Arizona. And so, growing up, we kind of lived in a few different places here and there all over Tucson, just kind of, like I said, existing, just trying to figure shit out because poverty is really sticky.
What's something about Tucson that people wouldn't guess? Because I know Tucson is in Arizona, but that's probably about it. Like, what's the deal with that place?
Well, I live in Colorado now, and one thing that surprised me was how much less humid it is here in Colorado than it is in Arizona.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Like every time I would come up here, my knuckles would start to chap like nobody's business.
I wonder if it's the elevation.
It might also be elevation, but yeah, basically like in Arizona, or rather here, when you get rain, it hits the ground and kind of sinks in.
Right.
And it just kind of like stays there. But in Arizona, it kind of hits the ground and just bounces. It hits the ground and evaporates again. And so it pretty much all just stays in the air.
Oh, yeah. So if it does rain, it just pretty much flash fries and just turns to steam.
It's also one of, I think it's actually the only place in the world in that general area that saguaro cactuses grow.
The ones from saguaro
cactus.
Like the cactuses, the cacti that are like this.
The Wile E. Coyote cactuses.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the stereotypical cactus whenever you think of a cactus.
If I drew a cactus.
It only grows it only really grows in around the southern Arizona area. So like a little bit into New Mexico, maybe a little bit into California, maybe, and a little bit into Mexico, maybe, but mostly just in southern Arizona.
Interesting.
And that was that Tucson was when you were young. So
yeah.
Okay, so that's where we're at. Sorry.
Yeah. So occasionally, when finances were particularly tight, we would all stay with my grandparents. So sometimes it was me, my dad, my sister, and my dad's parents, or rather my dad's mom and his stepdad.
Right.
Because growing up, never really actually knew my biological parental grandfather. It was always just
Really?
my dad's stepdad, who to me was grandpa, and then
Right.
and then my dad's dad was just somewhere else in the country, and that's just William.
You never met him, even still to this day?
I met him a few times. Native Atheist is asking, how do we pronounce this guy's last name? Bourgeois. My name is Rob Bourgeois. And so, yeah, I met him a couple times. To me, he was just kind of a guy.
I never met my grandparents or my grandfathers. Either one of them. They were both dead before I was born.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, at one point when we were living at my grandparents' place, some Mormon missionaries came by. And this was at a time in my dad's life where he was worried about how to raise two kids,
Right.
and give them some kind of moral structure.
Right.
And so he also had apparently had like a few experiences of his own that convinced him that there was a God. So like he was already very receptive to this message, and I was a dumb kid. So I just kind of like went along with it, because one thing that had always happened to me in school and at home was anytime I questioned the authority, whoever that may be, I got punished. And so, I just kind of went along with it and just figured, it's I don't want to say I was just doing it to avoid causing trouble, because I bought in. I was not. I wasn't the cynical type. I was perhaps a little too trusting. And so, the Mormon missionaries show up, and we start talking about, about God and Jesus and heaven, and like the different levels of heaven and all that stuff. And like, I don't.
Different levels of heaven. This is kind of a.
Oh.
I've heard of layers of hell and all that shit, but like, it was just like a video game.
I have
up in heaven.
I have a basement apartment in heaven. It's not the greatest, but I mean,
well, in Mormon theology, there are basically 3 different levels of heaven, so to speak.
Okay.
So there's the so like once you die, if you're a good person, basically, how it was always taught to me was that they don't necessarily believe that you need to be Mormon in order to make it there. That you can still make it in even if you're not, and that you'll also have a chance after your life to accept the gospel.
Right.
And that's where like baptism for the dead comes in and all that stuff. And like we'll put that to the side for now. But the 3 levels of heaven were
close
basically
enough to Halloween for that, I guess. Right?
There was the bottom level is like telestial, is not as good as Earth, basically, and then terrestrial is just as good as Earth, and then the celestial kingdom was supposed to be better than Earth, and that's where God lives, and where Jesus is and everything, and supposedly where Joseph Smith is, and you get to spend and
they live in a cul-de-sac.
and well, not just that, that while you're in the celestial kingdom, you also get the ability to sort of do the same thing God did with this with this universe. This is like make your own.
Oh, it's a sandbox.
Kind of, yeah. And that it's like a nesting sandbox that just goes infinitely deep. And it occurred to me later on that like if people can go to the celestial kingdom and like create their own universe and have their own people. Like, why not just apply simulation theory to this? You know, like, how do we know that didn't already happen?
This is my sandbox. Wait a minute.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, and so essentially it was explained to me that like that basically that's probably what happened. And it was an odd realization to me because I just felt I kind of felt this pit in my stomach when this was confirmed to me. And it was a weird moment of cognitive dissonance for me because on the one hand, I was supposed to worship this God character and believe that everything started with him.
Right.
And then on the other hand, we're saying no, it didn't. That he was just like us, which would be fine if that were just a conclusion that I had reached on my own. But having it come from someone of moderate authority in the church, it kind of disrupted everything because now it's the authorities conflicting with themselves.
Right. Yeah, that would throw me off for sure if there was conflict within the authoritative people that were there, right?
Yeah. And so but anyway, that was a few years down the road. I was brought up in the Mormon church from the age of like 12 to, I'll say, about 25-ish.
Okay.
So like that initial part of my life where I didn't have that indoctrination kind of allowed me to shed the indoctrination a little more readily later on down the road in my late 20s.
Right.
But even that was a very slow process.
You think that having the lack of those kinds of beliefs made it easier for you to scrap later on down the road?
I think having not been fed them from such an early age that it becomes a core part of like who you are.
Right. Yeah, that's more what I mean, I guess.
Yeah. I think that definitely did help. And it would probably piss my dad off to say so, but like that's actually one thing that I'm really grateful to him for, that he didn't indoctrinate me until until I started to at least a little bit think for myself.
Right. Because it is the first 5 years of our existence is where we can absorb the most stuff that becomes our core and sort of who we are, I guess you might say.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that a lot of religious organizations are particularly targeting such young kids. They want to be hip and trendy and cool, but not because it helps them with the adults, but because it helps them with the kids. And if they can get the kids young enough, they'll never leave.
Yep.
And it's a terrifying prospect to me. Not having the freedom of mind to really think these things through.
Yeah, if they can convince you to never want to leave, then they don't have to convince you to stay.
Yeah. And so over the course of like my 20s, well, actually, I'll back up a little bit. When you're in the church, you get ordained as a teacher at like 12. It took a little extra time for me because I was new to the whole thing. Or I'm sorry, deacon at 12, teacher at 14, and then
what's a deacon?
In the LDS church, it's just, it's the lowest level of the priesthood, basically.
Okay.
It's like this, the priesthood is split into two different major levels. So you have the Aaronic priesthood at the bottom, and you have the Melchizedek priesthood at the top. I may be getting those confused. It's been a long time. But anyway, so in the Aaronic priesthood, you have deacons and teachers, I believe, and then at the Melchizedek priesthood, you just have elders, and then like the upper echelons of the organization. So you get like bishops and yeah, basically.
You show me a teenager that isn't horny.
But yeah, so it took like a little extra time for me to be ordained a deacon because, I was new to the church and I had to learn a whole bunch of stuff. And then, so that happened around 13. Then, at 14, I was ordained a teacher. And then around 17, you're ordained an elder. And at 19, you're supposed to go on a mission.
Okay. While you were learning the stuff, did any of it strike you as weird?
I mean, no, because I wasn't really thinking about it that way. I wasn't really thinking about it critically. This was still the point at my life where I was just kind of accepting stuff that authorities told me.
Right.
Honestly, like I was more critical of stuff I was learning in school than I was of stuff I was learning in church, because as much as I was discouraged from thinking critically in school and at home, it wasn't as bad at school.
Right.
So like I could still ask questions and maybe get some answers, or yeah, that kind of thing. But one experience that really soured me on the whole school thing was when I got in trouble for correcting something the teacher said that was in fact wrong.
But do you remember what they said?
Nope. This was in third grade. This was 25 years ago.
I must say, I'm petty like that. I would still remember to this day. Like, no, he said it was page 5. I know for sure it was page 9.
Yeah. I mean, it was something minor, but, it was seen as like insubordination. But I'm like, if you're a teacher, shouldn't you want that?
Yeah.
You don't want to be giving people wrong information, right? Because like we're kids and we're impressionable, and like this can fuck up someone's understanding of the world for potentially their entire life. Like look at how much damage was done just by the one Bill Nye episode on probability that mentioned chromosomes. And look at how much ammunition that's given to people who, want to deny the existence of trans people. They still tout this, but it wasn't an episode about gender or sex or chromosomes. It was an episode about probability and all. Yeah, and all they were doing was setting up a premise.
Right.
They weren't even claiming it was like, necessarily true. It was just.
This is what he said.
So yeah, like getting a piece of wrong information into someone early enough can really wreck them down the road. And I think that's one of the reasons that I am so grateful to my dad for not having brought me up in a church until 12 years old.
Right.
Because having a little bit more, not a lot, but a little bit more life experience to kind of lay down first, allowed me to excise the religious beliefs a little more readily, but even that was a process.
Sure. I'd say when you have a set of beliefs that you pretty much had most of your life, it can be really tough to shed that stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it can cause some crazy shit in your head, right? So you start self-doubting almost in some, like, wait a minute, like, what the hell is going on here? I don't feel like myself anymore. Ultimately, eventually you stop feeling that way because you realize after you meet other people that are been in your boat that this is not something that's unusual, and it's happening more and more too.
Yeah. This time 12 years ago, I would have considered myself a deeply right-wing fundamentalist Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I was homophobic. I was transphobic. I was kind of racist.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a moth in here.
Don't worry, they don't sting.
It was like this far from my face. But I'm not proud of any of that. It's
nothing to be proud of. So yeah, I
right.
get it.
Yeah. And in fact, I'm kind of horrified looking back at a lot of the positions that I used to hold. I mean, for at least a few years, I thought dinosaurs weren't even real.
Oh no!
Really?
I thought, yeah, I thought they were that all of the bones were just kind of like created as they were and put there, and it took a particularly poignant comment from my now roommate, whose cat that is on my bed, by the way. And he said, that would make God a liar.
Yep.
Adam.
Because he would have put those there in order to convince us of the fact of deep time, when in reality it's not the case. Would he be
according
that,
to the belief system, yeah.
Right, yeah. Would he be that deceptive? And I had to realize that the God that I believed in wouldn't be deceptive like that. And
what are you talking about?
Well,
he confused the shit out of the Hebrews as they're wandering through the desert after escaping Egypt. Right?
Well, see, I hadn't examined that yet either. So,
that's a long time to be lost in one desert. I'm just saying. I don't care how big. 40 years. I don't care how big the desert is.
3-day walk takes 40 years with God's help. Yeah.
That's what happens when you let Siri tell you how to get to the airport. Fucking.
Yeah, honestly, like that would have been a lot more impactful to my deconversion if I had encountered that sooner.
Right.
Because like, yeah, for me, like this was the first Uncle Beck is high.
It is Saturday.
But like, so yeah, this idea that, that deep time did in fact occur, and that, dinosaurs are real, that they happened. This was kind of the first big dent in my faith, because what this did was made me realize slowly that evolution did in fact happen.
Mm-hmm.
Despite what everyone who was around me who called themselves Christian would tell me, except a few, there were a few who didn't. But that, there was this process over millions of years, that dinosaurs, the ones that survived the big catastrophic meteor strike that poisoned the atmosphere, that those slowly mutated over time, and the population became something else, something we wouldn't call dinosaurs, even though, cladistically they still are. Yes. And but even so, even with all of this, I still considered myself Christian, and I was still transphobic, and I was still homophobic, and I was still kind of racist.
I think saying kind of racist is silly. We were racist.
Well, I was selectively racist.
Well, okay, all right, I get what you mean. Sure.
It was more just saying racist kind of paints with a broad brush that I don't really want to use, because it's not quite accurate. Okay. But there were things that I said and believed that were racist.
Right.
For instance, after 9/11 happened, I, got all on the Islamophobic bandwagon,
America fuck yeah train.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Me too.
And I was very deeply distrustful of immigrants, for instance, and especially Arabs and Mexicans.
Right.
Because I had heard so many horror stories and didn't think about these people as people.
Wow, I could never imagine. So I've never thought that way about people myself personally, right? So that's just
to be honest. It feels like you're like when I think back to those times, I feel like I'm watching a movie, because me would never think like that. But being scared of terrorists and assuming that the world is about to end, and you're like kind of religious, and you're kind of like nervous about the world, so you lean into this like fundamentalist thinking, which is ultimately right wing and xenophobic and homophobic and transphobic. Like, it's just
xenophobic. That's the word I needed. Thank you.
You just kind of lean in, like it's supported by the churches, whether they do it willingly or not. It is. So you kind of lean into it because the world is scary, and then you look up, and next you know, you hate brown people, and you have no idea why.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like, it's when you're brought up in a way where you don't see a lot of different kinds of people. You don't really have to interact with people, and you're very
hi JIL.
You're very
funny.
You're very sheltered from the world and other people's experiences. It can be a little hard to really understand that, like, you understand abstractly that these people are people, but you don't quite grasp it. You just kind of see traffic. Like, that's one of the things that contributes to road rage, for instance, that, you're out there and you don't see people, you just see cars. And so when somebody cuts you off, it's not like, it doesn't seem like there's a person there. It just seems like a car cut you off, and like, it's just the system, and there's this thing that just happened to you, and there's like no one to talk to about it. And so people get really pissed off on the road, and it doesn't help at all that, our entire country is set up in a way where you basically need a car or you don't get anywhere. So on top of like how long people spend driving, there's also, everybody behind the wheel, including many people who shouldn't have driver's licenses, but do because it's a necessity. So like all of those contributing factors kind of add up to not really looking around and seeing the people in the cars around you as people, and just seeing them as entities, as just this abstract entity there that's just taking up space and getting in your way.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so like
barriers.
yeah. And so like, growing up in Tucson, for instance, a lot of stuff in Tucson is written in Spanish.
Mhm.
And if you are brought up speaking English and believing that people who live here should speak English, then those people speaking Spanish are a barrier.
Yeah.
Hmm. Most
And
of those
you
people
reduce
speak
them to a
English, though,
barrier.
right? So, I
Yeah,
mean, here in
most.
Canada, everything's bilingual as well. It's all French and
Mhm.
English, right? But
Yeah. Well, in Tucson, it's probably about 70-30. Like there are kids I went to school with who, during certain portions of the day, we would divide the class, and
Yeah.
this group would go over here and take lessons in English, and this group over here would take lessons in Spanish.
right.
Like ESL classes, like English
I
second
have no
language.
idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they were learning.
It's the same up here in Chicago because there's like a huge Latin population. So like
Wow, all the way
some
up there.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's so prevalent. Like everyone in Chicago knows a little bit of Spanish, like especially foods and which foods they like and don't like with the
Mhm.
accent and everything. But we don't really realize like a lot of people are just now getting here. So like when you're in school, like you said, people will just break off and then they get certain portions of their lesson, like some of the more complicated things. They have a Spanish speaking teacher that will go through that stuff with them in their own language.
Yeah. And so like it wasn't as bad as I thought it was in Tucson, because like you said, Neil, most of the stuff was still written in English, and besides that, I was getting lessons in Spanish every year. It was actually I used to joke when I was xenophobic that that in Tucson Spanish was a required class, but English wasn't. That, pithy but stupid.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure both were in fact required, and it makes sense, because like when you have such a large population of people who don't speak English, which until the last 12 or so years I didn't even realize wasn't our national language, it makes sense that you would want to foster the communication between those different differently speaking groups.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, fostering communications is how we communicate better, which ultimately ends up for more understanding of each other as well.
One
And
would
once
hope.
you understand, yeah, of course, and when you understand people a little bit better, then there's a little bit more. It's easier to, get along, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
However, there are even some people that you may just not want to understand because they're just that shitty of people. So
yeah,
there's that part of it too.
And for a while, that was me.
Well,
And
you were able to shed all that. So
yeah. And so it's kind of funny. Around 2006, I was introduced by an old friend to this webcomic site called Smack Jeeves. It doesn't exist anymore. Like, look it up if you want. It's not there.
I remember that somehow.
Yeah. But like through Smack Jeeves, I was actually able to make a few friends. And I was still homophobic, xenophobic, and transphobic. I didn't know what trans people were at the time. I didn't have any concept of that, but I would have been transphobic if I were to have met them. So that's why I'm still listing it. But there were a few people who I kind of like made friends with, and a few of them were gay.
Mm-hmm.
One of them I am still friends with to this day. And he helped me so much to understand that, you know, gay people are just people. You know, so what, he likes dick. You know, he's still one of the funniest people I know. And he's still one of the best friends I've ever had. And so his patience with me in processing and voicing my often stupid opinions about his experience really did help me get out of a lot of that shit. So,
yeah.
In case TJ Pownell is listening, that's for you.
I like
and
Dick.
now,
He's a cool guy.
All right, Neil, if you could bring in his long lost friend from the backstage, welcome to the show. We have.
He would not agree to appear on here.
No,
that particular friend. If you're referring to TJ Pownell, he would be fine with it. If you're referring to the friend who brought me to Smack Jeeves in the first place, he is so deeply ingrained in Christianity that my simply correcting him on the use of the term atheist led him to believe that I was denying all of his experiences on the subject of religion. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And I explicitly told him I'm not repeatedly. But yeah, just didn't sink in. So
Christing on, maybe like crossing on, I don't know, fishing on.
He's kind of a weird case because, like, despite being super despite being like super Christian and kind of evangelical and everything, he is like very far left wing. Like actually communist,
right?
Actually anarchist, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
these are not terms
positions.
I am ascribing to him. These are terms he has adopted for himself.
Right, that's just what he said.
Yeah, that's his words and his positions. And like, to an extent, I understand. You know, I have moved very significantly left over the last decade. Like, even 10 years ago, I would have considered myself a conservative.
Okay.
I don't anymore. And a lot of that had to do with questioning things, questioning my assumptions, questioning my opinions, you know, questioning my beliefs in general, and realizing that, you know, my experience is not more valid than anyone else's.
Right.
It's just the only one I've got.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm standing here with my little puzzle piece, and I'm thinking I've got the whole picture.
Right.
and realizing slowly over the course of a long damn time that that's a really stupid outlook. How can I possibly have the whole picture? I have one puzzle piece that is white with 2 black spots on it. How do I know what the whole picture looks like?
I am making up information right now.
It could be dice, it could be Dalmatians, it could be Braille, it could be the lottery.
Could be vampire bite.
Yeah, who knows? And so all I can do is try to like look at other people's pieces and see where it fits and try to, construct as complete of a picture as I can. And I think that, being able to bridge gaps and communicate with other people is, extremely conducive to that. And
Mm-hmm.
the one thing that I've seen bring people together more than anything else that I have personally experienced is tabletop gaming.
Yeah.
Nice little segue there.
It kind yeah, like, well, I mean, it kind of adds up because like it's how I got from there to here, and it's not, discrete buckets that everything's in, everything's jumbled together. And that's kind of life,
Yeah, for sure.
and so like with games, what I try to do is to bring people together, to kind of bridge gaps. I want to make games that are accessible to a whole bunch of people so that you don't have to be an expert to stand a chance against an expert.
Right.
I lose my games all the time. I lose a lot. And you know what? That's how I want it. I don't want to win all the time because like
gets boring.
Well, I mean, a lot of people take it personally when they lose. And like this was actually something that would happen growing up playing games with my grandparents. Like me and my grandma and my grandpa and my sister would sometimes sit down and play Monopoly.
Worst game ever. Breaking up family since 1812.
I disagree, but the thing about Monopoly is you have to play it rules as written, because if you try to modify it, you're going to extend the game like no one's fucking business. Mm-hmm. Never, ever, ever play with the free parking lottery.
Amen.
It is a recipe for disaster.
I'm high risk, high reward. I need that free parking.
You get free parking when you land on it, and it's free.
And then you get
but getting extra
money,
getting extra money just extends the game. Because, like, yeah, think about what ends the game of Monopoly. People going bankrupt.
This is keeping me out of bankruptcy.
So when you add money back into the game, like there's supposed to be a drain of money in the game. There's supposed to be money that leaves the game and then only comes back during certain events. If you catch the money that's going down the drain and you feed it back into the game, you are extending the game by like a good factor of 3 at least. But anyway, I was a kid and I liked playing Monopoly with my family because, we could actually sit down and we could engage with this game and we could all just kind of play together and it was just fun. And then for some reason I was drawn to examining the structure of the game from like a very young age. I was like 6 when I started doing this. And so like Monopoly and Sorry in particular were ripe for modification. And I did a lot. I had come up with one version of Sorry where like everybody's pawns all start in one particular start. And then you're going around the board and each pawn has like a little piece of paper that you would like impale over the neck of the pawn, right?
Yeah.
And so like they all start with a red square of paper, and then they go around, they go into the home, and then you take the red piece off and you put a blue piece on, and it goes to the blue start.
Level up.
Yeah, and then whoever got all of their pawns in the green home first was the winner. I would never play this with anybody
I'd play it.
because it's like, here's the game of sorry, but each pawn now has to go 4 times as far.
Expert level. That's the
Yeah.
legendary all skulls on version of sorry.
Yeah, Theo. It was the original Monopoly was called the Landlord's Game, and it was meant to teach the problem of capitalism. Funny enough, it still does that, but it's at odds with its own marketing. So like the marketing of Monopoly teaches you like, hey, play this game, you can be rich. No, one player can be rich. Everyone else is going to be bankrupt. It is not a game about being rich. It's a game about downward mobility.
So in
I
essence,
can talk
you win
about
every-
games for hours, by the way. So at any time, feel free to steer me back to Deconversion.
Oh, we could talk more about them in the after party too. So, which will happen, I'll guarantee you. So let's see. You have, what is it? Raspberry Grenade is the name of your website there. That has the games and stuff.
raspberrygrenade.games. And then I've got a series of different games that I'm working on. I have 3 that are kind of done right now. I've got Gordian Maps, which is a game about basically taking on the role. Yeah, you take on the role of a navigation app that can control traffic lights.
Oh shit.
And you're trying to guide your customers to the destination pin while guiding your opponents away.
Oh, interesting.
And one of the catches in this game is that you don't control your pieces directly. Ever. You never control your pieces directly. All you're trying to do is change the lights and choose which streets move in order to give your vehicles the best position to get into the destination. So when you choose a street,
Jonathan, buy this
it's not
game.
just your cars that move. Every vehicle on that street moves.
Okay.
And in both directions. And if there's a turn, then they'll turn off or whatever. And you can even choose a street that has none of your cars on it and only move your opponents.
I'm giving the flashing yellow to my cars, and a solid red for everyone else.
And so like this one, currently I think on the Game Crafter it's available for $35. Okay. It's a little on the expensive side just because it's print on demand. These are not mass produced; they are made when you order them.
Jonathan, pay the man.
And then there's Asterism, which is a tile laying game with pieces that don't tessellate. So you end up with
tessellate?
Tessellation is a geometric property of a shape that allows it to fill an infinite plane without gaps. Pentagons don't do that. So there's gaps. And so you're trying to work around the gaps in order to form closed shapes, and then you get to claim the stars that make up that shape. And then if somebody else claims the same star that you already used, then it becomes neutral again, and you're just trying to get to 20 stars first.
Oh, interesting.
It's like Pentathello.
Kind of, but on the subject of Othello, this is Flanxiety. This is kind of an extension of Othello into the realm of a 4-player game and using dice.
Oh, weird.
So this game is about 55% luck and 45% strategy. You roll a die, you put it in the grid, and if it's flanking, then you deal damage to your opponent's dice in between. And so this is meant to be like a very accessible game to like kids. You know, it can be somewhat educational, but it's not overtly. Because one thing that I didn't like as a kid was all of these educational games that would stock my teacher's shelves that were just boring as hell to play. And so, you know, that's one of these things that you know, I'm trying to fix. You know, I want to make games that are fun and that can foster an interest in different subjects. So in addition to these, I've also got I've got a few other projects. One is the Splinterville Shuffle, which is kind of
My favorite dance.
it's kind of my intention to it's like a take on the Mario Party style formula, but pulling like the best parts from all sorts of different games, including, honestly, Sonic Shuffle is the biggest inspiration. Because the idea with this game is I want to make a game like Sonic Shuffle, but good. Because Sonic Shuffle is not good at all. But it had some cool ideas, like spending a card to move.
Yeah.
So I'm using that as like the basis. But yeah, and then going off of that one, I've got a companion game called Splinterville World's Rally, where it's a go-kart racing game.
Yeah.
But one thing that I noticed with a lot of racing games is that the spaces always follow the track. That, you know, you don't go off-road ever. You just follow the track. So on this one, it's a hex grid with a track in it. And so if you miss your turn, you just, you know, you just end up in the grass. And now it's going to be harder to get
like
back.
Wile E. Coyote and
there are potentially some maps with cliffs too.
Nice.
But yeah, and so like every character in both of these games, the games will share characters, by the way. Splinterville is a setting that I'm building for these games. And then there will be a cast of characters, almost all of which I created, but I'm also working with a friend of mine to use some of his characters as well.
Okay. Cool.
Like Yoshi, Bowser.
No. I mean, that would be amazing, but no.
You got Yishi and Razor.
There are some characters that are going to be a little bit analogous to those, but their analogosicity is not going to be the focus of them. I know that's not a word, but I don't care.
Matthew the Mechanic.
It is now.
And then one more that I'm working on is a game called Church and State.
Oh. You know,
there's a reason I saved this one for last.
I have a friend who runs a game store. It's called Craving for a Game, and he sells games and stuff like that. And he's always looking for new, unique games. I should put you guys in touch with each other.
I was about to say we're going to talk after that.
Because like the games that I make are games that I generally don't see anywhere else.
Right.
You know, like Asterism was me wondering, like, can I make a tile laying game with pieces that don't tessellate? Well, yes, I can. There it is. And then Flanxiety was a game that I kind of created accidentally.
Oh, cool.
I was playing with Lego, and I happened to, you know, have a die, and I just kind of I happened to roll it, and it just fell perfectly into this little 2x2 gap that I had in the board, in like the Lego construction. It just fell in there, and I'm like, I can use this.
The light bulb went on. Ding, ding,
yeah.
ding, ding.
And so I made a game that involved dice placement, and then I, you know, of course I knew that I couldn't sell it as long as it was made of Lego. And so eventually when the game crafters started doing custom acrylic pieces, I could make my own board, and then I did. And then Gordian Maps was a game that arose from the fact that I have a whole lot of wooden cars about this big. And I'm like, I could make a game about traffic. And then I made a game about traffic and didn't use any of those cars.
So close, yet so
I
far
saw a
away.
bunch of those little wooden, the green ones, red ones, blue ones. They're all little colored little wooden cars. I remember those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah. And then, so church and state, the idea is that you're playing as a church. Like every player is dealt 3 positive beliefs and 1 negative belief. So like these are your tenets. These are the things that your church believes in, or in the case of the negative belief, does not believe in.
Right.
And if you get duplicates, that's fine. If you get negations, that's fine. Deal with it. Yeah, if you end up with an explicit contradiction in your hand of cards, play on.
Really?
Yep.
So what's the
play
point
on.
of the game?
Well, what you're trying to do is basically maintain as much relevance as possible through the march of time. So you're
Okay.
trying to keep your beliefs, your tenets, as high as possible, while keeping your disbelief as low as possible in the minds of the general populace. And
Okay.
so there's a track that keeps score on how popular or unpopular each individual belief is. So like if resurrection is sitting at like 64%, then at the end of the game, if you have that belief in your hand of tenets, then you get 64 points. If you have the disbelief in your hand, then that's 36 points, because it's 100 minus the value there. And so and if you have any influence tokens left at the end of the game, each of those is worth 2 points. So not worth a whole lot, but potentially worth saving sometimes. And then like the numbers in the middle, like it's 50%, and then it just kind of like tapers off in each direction. Like it goes pretty fast in either direction, and it smooths out to or actually the graph is more like this. So like the changes are more extreme in the middle compared to the ends, because like toward the end, you might use an influence token to boost a belief from 98% to 99%, and that's not quite worth it in terms of like the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a game on how to keep your church afloat. So what's the state part of it?
The state part of it is just comes up through the timeline. There's a whole bunch of like event cards and discovery cards, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to either suppress these events or discoveries, or what's the opposite of suppress?
Suppress, uplift.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like or like call attention to them, basically. Like make them more prevalent in the minds of the populace. Promote, yes, thank you. Bolster, promote, yes. And so by doing that, then you can affect how popular or unpopular given beliefs are, and then you can even potentially change the state of the game, because under certain conditions there might be certain abilities that become active for your churches, and then once that's active, you can just do that action instead of one of the normal actions you get to do. So yeah, the goal with this was not to
thanks Jonathan.
Dissuppress.
The goal with this was not to it's not to like badmouth anybody. That's one of the reasons I'm not using, you know, known religions as your potential churches. I broke those down into beliefs that I tried to steelman as much as possible, because while I am critical and even perhaps cynical on the subject of religion, I don't want the game to be cynical.
Right.
And I don't want it to be offensive, and I don't want it to be I don't want it to throw jabs more than anything else.
Game of Cards dice. It just comes with like risk in the box, and then the government part is over here. You play that.
I mean, part of the reason for the game as it exists is to kind of show what things might be like, and kind of cast a critical eye on what happens when you don't separate church and state.
Sure.
Because
yeah,
the
sure.
churches in this game are very much involved in the state of like society and the government, and you know, like when evolution shows up, you can suppress it, sure, and you can extend part 1 of the you can extend part 2 of the game, but it's going to show up again. And it's going to keep showing up.
Right.
Until it eventually just goes through. You know, same thing with heliocentrism. That's the card that ends part 1 of the game. And so the game is in 3 parts. So you have this segmented deck of like timeline cards. And you know, when heliocentrism finally like is discovered and like occurs, then part 1 is over. And you take the rest of those cards out. So like anything that would have given churches an ability is just gone. And you don't get that ability in this game. And you might get it in a different game later when you play. And so like the games are meant to be playing a little bit differently each time, you know, a different set of circumstances, a different hand of tenets, a different landscape as far as the makeup of the different beliefs that are going on.
I saw that one.
Skywatcher coming in clutch. Church name could be Our Lady of Perpetual Premenstrual Tension.
I like this one too.
Oh, sorry.
Evolution shows up, everyone starts changing.
I mean, it does change the game.
That's cool. I like that. That's neat.
And then at the end of the game, like there's three events that can show up, and once all 3 of them have occurred, then the game ends. So like so part 3 is usually guaranteed to be the longest, but not always. And so in this one, so like in part 1, it's easier to build up beliefs. It's easier for beliefs to go northward. In part 2, it's harder to move them up, and it start to be a little bit easier to bring them down. And then in part 3, it's much easier for beliefs to start going southward, and not so much to go northward anymore.
Oh no, carbon dating card. No. I lay my Inquisitor card face down.
Yeah.
Face down.
I don't know.
It's not
Yu-Gi-Oh
reference.
How do you know? You haven't played it. It might work like that.
Well, speaking of
I've
face
played
down,
Yu-Gi-Oh.
No, you haven't played this game. Maybe you do it like Yu-Gi-Oh.
Well, you do actually start with 3 of your 4 tenets face down. You turn one of them face up at the start of the game.
Master of the commandments.
You turn one of them face up at the start of the game, so everybody knows, you know.
So flip
So everybody has everybody has a starting point for what your church believes in, and then you can turn another one face up at any time during the game to get one more influence token.
Yugi boy.
And
My
you can
Inquisitor
even do
card
that.
was meant to.
You can even do that in response to an event or something that would normally just affect you immediately. You can turn one face up and get an influence token immediately.
You're allowed to
like,
look
any
at
time.
the player's allowed to look at those cards that are face down though, right? Like you know what you have.
You know what you have, yes.
Okay.
You
I was
are
like- I was
allowed
like,
to look
wow,
at
what a
your
risk.
face down cards.
It's like I don't know. I don't like what's happening, but I'm gonna flip the card that I don't know what it is.
But
Please
yeah,
help
if
me.
a card that's a tenant card that you have face up, you cannot turn face down again, even if you exchange it for a new card.
Mm.
If you exchange out of a card that's face up, you get another card that's face up.
Mhm.
So you can't just like swap out your tenants just to gain more influence.
Are you gonna make these though? You gonna make game mats for them?
Maybe. I think the Game Crafter has the ability to do that, but they are quite expensive. It's like $30 each.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
what I paid for these ones.
$30.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
American?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
These
so
aren't cheap,
it's,
buddy.
Yeah, it's quite expensive to do that, and I don't quite have the market yet to really be investing in expensive stuff
Yeah.
when my games themselves are already kind of expensive to start with.
Well, I had a custom mat made for me when I was playing on the circuit with Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff like that. It was for my Yu-Gi-Oh YouTube channel. So
Oh, neat.
I was playing Lightstorm.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I had a custom one done. Everybody wanted it too when I took it out. Oh, can I have one? I like this is the only one. No, sorry.
This is one of one. Plebeian. Don't look at it too hard. You might dirty it.
Yeah.
Your filthy eyes all over it. So you said, do you play any like tabletops? You know what I'm talking about. You know I'm talking about rolling them polyhedral drive. We're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. Are you in?
I used to play D&D. I kind of fell out of it for a couple reasons. Number one, I got tired of fighting against the system just to build a character. Like,
take it down brick by
yeah,
brick.
like I was, playing 3.5, just kind of, it was so much stuff
Yeah.
to comb through just to decide what my character was going to be like.
Ollie likes 3.5.
Huh?
Ollie likes 3.5.
In the chat there.
Yeah. I'm not like knocking it. If you want to comb through all that stuff and you find this kind of thing compelling, go for it. I don't. I'm of the mind where, like, if I want to make a character, I want it to be like a 20-minute process tops. I just want to play the damn game. That's all. I just want to play.
20 minutes. Ollie's still naming his dagger. Like he's writing the backstory for his dagger.
3.5 had the most options for character creation. It did, but all of the options were very specific, and there were a ridiculous number of them. And so, combing through the list was just, it was awful to me. And then Pathfinder happened, and that wasn't any better.
I like Pathfinder.
And a friend of mine was developing his own. In fact, my roommate, this same roommate, he was developing his own role-playing game system that honestly just seems to play much better. It's a lot smoother to build a character, and
GURPS.
No, it's not GURPS. He didn't like GURPS. Probably for the same reason I didn't like 3.5.
Fair enough.
And like, somebody at one point introduced me to Besom, and like that's like all the problems I have with 3.5, but squared.
Writ large.
Yeah, it was it was absolutely a nightmare. Besom was like, here, let's take the most tedious part of D&D, scrolling through feats and spells, and let's make everything that. Everything.
It's not so bad. Just memorize everything, and then you don't have to scroll anymore.
There were like tens of thousands of things that you could pick and put into your character. It was like the smallest, most fiddly Lego set you have ever seen in your life.
It's like when you want to watch like an action movie on Netflix. So you type in action like an idiot. And then you spend the next 4 days scrolling through all of the options.
Yeah, what kind of action do you want?
And then you just fall asleep to the menu with something's preview playing in the background.
I don't even bother with like video subscriptions anywhere anymore. I've already got enough with YouTube and podcasts.
I'm addicted. I can't stop.
My YouTube queue is currently sitting at 2,100 and 2,104 videos.
You just queue that shit up.
Yeah. I'm a little bit behind. I'm about 3 months behind.
Well, you're smarter than me because I just like, I'll remember it.
I've
never remembered one thing that I've forgotten.
I've gotten in the habit of just constantly clicking on the watch later button on every video that I plan to watch later.
You're a
and then
genius.
when I'm actually watching later, if I don't really care to see it, I'll just skip it.
I will use your wisdom in my day-to-day life. You've transformed me this day.
Yeah, the actual like queue function that they have on YouTube is just like for your actively playing. So if you want to watch this right now, or you want to watch this right after the current thing that you're watching, just throw that on your queue. But otherwise, I would just put it on watch later.
What are you crinkling over there, Neil?
No, just sleeves. Sleeves for the guy.
Jeez.
Sorry, fuck.
Yeah, I got a lot of sleeves myself.
Apparently I have some unopened decks.
Oh.
I've got
Shadalls. Yeah, I got a bucket bag full of them.
But here's the thing: I don't play trading card games. So all of these just have like standard ass playing cards in them, and these are used for prototyping.
Oh, nice.
So like I'll get like a slip of paper and I'll write on it, or I'll print out on it, and then I'll cut it out, and then I'll stick it in one of these, and then the actual like playing card gives it a little body. And the reason I do it that way is playing cards are ridiculously cheap, whereas getting blanks would actually be more expensive.
Right.
And then it's really easy to change them out and make edits on my game in order to make things play a little bit better. I can just pull a card out, just pull the face out of the sleeve, write on it, and then stick it back in, and change is made. Because I'm constantly revising.
Neil. The dagger of disco. That is Ollie's dagger. All right. So one last question about your deconversion. So if you could go back in time and talk to believer you, what would you tell that person knowing what you know now?
Well, I mean, the cliche answer is, question more and everything, but like, I don't think I was really in a position to do that. So, because like doing more questioning would have just gotten me in more trouble.
Right.
A lot of times teachers would get pissed off at me when I asked too many questions. This happened with several English teachers.
I was constantly suspended.
In fact, one English teacher, when I would ask a question, would dismiss me with the words "quit whining," as
Wow.
if that addressed anything. So like, man, I don't know. I do feel like a lot of my experience was environmentally dictated.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, apart from just finding my way out, how I found my way out, I don't know if I can like give myself advice on that front. You know? I don't know. I can't even imagine how things would be different now if they were different then.
Right.
Like coming out of high school, I tried to go in the Navy
Mm.
and I was permanently disqualified for military service. You know,
Really?
how much different would things be if I'd been accepted? I might
Yeah.
not even be an atheist right now. You know, I probably wouldn't even have made any of my games.
Interesting.
So I've come to a conclusion, Neil.
Mm-hmm.
Rob is alternate. Well, Jonathan is alternate version of Rob. They're the same person, but the timeline split. There's the Navy, right? The Navy crux was the split, but then they both do games. One's a game master, one's a game creator. They're the same person. I've determined.
Yeah, I was disqualified for retinal holes in my left eye.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's problematic for them.
Yeah, even though like they were really hurting for people, I was going to be a nuclear engineer. I actually when I took the ASVAB, I got a 99 on it.
Damn.
Wow.
That is the highest score available. And I also was told that I had, at least for the first half of 2005, the highest line score in the state of Colorado. They didn't want me.
They didn't deserve
They
it.
were
Too smart for him, Rob. Just too smart for him.
I guess. But like, so they, so yeah, I guess the retinal holes were just that big of a problem, I guess. So, oh well. It's one of the reasons I wasn't confirmed about any kind of draft. At least not for me personally.
There's Jonathan's at fuck, same as Fab. We are the same. Thank you.
Well, you'll meet Jonathan shortly because I'm sure he'll want to jump in and say hi with the after party.
I think I have met Jonathan before in some of Student Dr. Ben's streams.
There you go.
Oh, that's highly probable. So yes.
Yeah, I've kind of hung out with Student Dr. Ben a bit, and we used to go to
Ben's
college
awesome.
together.
Oh, did you? Cool.
Yeah,
Cool. Ben's
yeah.
good
He
people.
he was even in one of my capstone projects for the theater program.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Maybe Ben will pop in tonight. I don't know. I haven't seen him in the chat yet, but you never know.
Yeah, I definitely see Ollie. I see Jonathan, and I saw Beck earlier.
Yeah, Uncle Beck's there. Beck might jump in too. Well, we'll see. But any of you guys out there in the chat want to jump in, you can. Just let us know. And there's a link for the after party in the description box below if you just want to hang out in the chat and watch and, quote funny things that we'll bring up on the screen. Also, all of Rob's links are down there, including all of his Raspberry Grenade stuff is also down there, and his personal YouTube, which you don't really do much with anymore, but it's got some I found some funny stuff on there. So
I used to do like Let's Plays and vlogs and stuff on my personal YouTube, but I don't anymore. It's just I wasn't getting much response, and I just kind of got too busy.
Well, now people can go and see classic Rob stuff. So
throwback.
Yeah. So but thanks, Rob. Thanks for coming and sharing your story with us and showing us your games and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. We'll talk more about that in the after party.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone in the chat. I hope you guys had fun with us tonight. If you, like I said, if you want to be in the after party, let us know. And also thanks to my wonderful patrons. Without you guys, I really couldn't do this. It definitely helps me level everything out. So it's great that you're here to help out. I appreciate it all. And yeah, that's about it. And like I always say at the end of the interview part, like the late great Christopher Hitchens once said, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.